In New York City, 1991, a damp May evening drapes Midtown with the stale perfume of exhaust and sidewalk pretzels. Inside a half-lit supper club where businessmen once toasted mergers but now mutter over shrinking portfolios, a young black waitress eases a chipped porcelain cup onto a linen coaster before the only patron who has managed to look invisible while wearing designer leather. The neon sign beyond the rain-streaked window flashes magenta every time a cab swings past, tinting his cheekbones and the silver spoon he toys with between gloved fingers. She does not recognize him. Her tired eyes are busy converting menu prices into diapers and bus passes. $5, she calculates, would buy a gallon of whole milk for the daughter sleeping 2 subway rides away. The man cups his drink as though shielding a delicate flame. Steam ghosts upward and vanishes under the rim of oversized sunglasses he never removes. She waits, smoothing a frayed thread on her apron, hoping boldness won't be mistaken for insolence when she finally asks for a small tip. Instead, he rises with the hush of someone trained to soften every footprint, thanks her in a voice that sounds like brushed velvet, and drifts toward the door. No crinkle of bills, just a square of paper napkin left under the spoon, 3 quick strokes of blue ink and the initials MJ. The door sighs shut behind him. The waitress rolls her eyes, pockets the napkin only so she can throw it away outside, and returns to wiping tables. Weeks later, that scrap will summon reporters to her narrow Harlem hallway, install fear across her pillow, and detonate a truth no tabloid has managed to print. Tonight, it is merely damp pulp and ink, and she is far too exhausted to believe that a life can hinge on something so flimsy. She wakes before dawn to the metallic rattle of the L train echoing through the thin walls of her walk-up above a 24-hour laundromat on Lenox Avenue. She lies still, listening. The drip in the kitchen sink. The shoosh of her 4-year-old turning over in the next room, hugging a threadbare plush rabbit. The hush that follows feels momentarily generous, and Mia Robinson lets herself believe she has another 5 minutes before the day starts clawing. 2 errands are already arguing in her brain. Pick up overdue rent envelopes from the super, replace the empty bottle of children's cough syrup, and a familiar bitterness knots her stomach when she remembers she never bought that gallon of milk. By 6:30, she is in her pressed, but no longer snowy, apron, walking south toward the subway, carrying a cassette player that chews through batteries but refuses to play anything except the B-side of Donny Hathaway. The train screeches uptown, flinging newspapers across laps. Headlines about Persian Gulf troop withdrawals flutter beside ads promising miracle hair growth. Mia keeps her gaze on the cracked linoleum floor, fingers tracing the outline of the napkin folded into her coat pocket. She almost tossed it last night. Instead, she slid it into her recipe box next to brittle snapshots of a younger self singing in a Queen's recording studio, eyes wide with a hope that has since calcified into caution. The Starlight Room sits on the 8th floor of an Art Deco hotel whose brass elevator panels are polished twice a day, whether guests use them or not. It was once the place where jazz greats coasted toward sunrise gigs after 2 a.m. jam sessions. Now, in the early 90s recession, it survives on nostalgia, a discreet maitre d', and the rumor that superstars choose its anonymity when midtown steakhouses feel like open stages. Mia likes the stage lighting, dim vermilion sconces that pour soft shadows over linen-draped tables, because it flatters the wrinkles beneath her eyes, wrinkles paid for in rehearsals and heartbreak. She dislikes the emptiness. 10 tables out of 40 were occupied last night, and none of the guests seemed to taste the rosemary in the lamb, just she helped the sous chef adjust. But emptiness means silence, and silence leaves space for memory. A 1988 showcase in Brooklyn, where she stood beneath laser beams, believing a producer's handshake meant she would never have to pour coffee again. A small print contract that siphoned away her rights. A confetti of rejection letters after she refused the producer's after-hours mentorship. The fallout shoved her dream into a shoebox and pushed her behind a dessert trolley. Still, music lives in the way she balances plates, in the little vocal run she murmurs when she refills water glasses. Colleagues notice her hum and tease. "Sing for us, songbird." But Mia just smiles, because laughing would split something brittle inside her ribs. Late afternoon drifts toward the sluggish dinner shift. A bleach-sharp scent from freshly mopped floors mixes with the cinnamon undertone of the house-mulled wine. Mia straightens table settings by habit, though they barely skewed overnight. At 5:07, a single reservation appears in the logbook. Mr. Jones, party of one. The name is bland, but she sees that a private corner booth has been requested, curtains partially drawn, no flowers, low candle. The maitre d' raises an eyebrow at her. "Your section," he says quietly, as though announcing a secret. She nods. There is little point protesting on a Tuesday when tips will be thin. 7:13. The elevator doors open on a whisper. A man steps out alone, wearing a charcoal trench coat despite the mild weather. Fedora angled just enough to share space with oversized dark glasses. Two security staff wearing earpieces linger near the hallway, but do not follow him in. Mia recognizes that kind of caution, the hush around a person who is used to being hunted by cameras. Her chest tightens. She greets him with a neutral smile and guides him to the booth. He speaks only twice while seated. "Black coffee, please." And after scanning the dessert menu as if it were written in code, "Nothing else." His voice is airy, pitched slightly higher than she expects, but there is firmness beneath the feathered tone. When she sets the cup down, her courage flares. She leans closer, ensuring no colleague can overhear. "Sir, would you mind leaving $5 on the table? Milk's gone up again." She delivers the line calmly, almost rehearsed, though her palms sweat enough to blur the lacework pattern on the saucer. The man tilts his head. Through the black lenses, she imagines eyes weighing something far heavier than her request. The corners of his mouth bend. They do not quite reach a smile, and he nods once. Relief floods her spine. She steps back, waiting for the scratch of a pen on the bill or the easy rustle of cash. Instead, after a single sip, he lowers the cup, fishes a ballpoint from his coat, and writes 3 quick strokes on his napkin. Then he stands, smoothing his immaculate sleeve. "Thank you for the coffee," he murmurs, voice now barely audible over the soft-speaking jazz trio piped through hidden speakers. He leaves, footsteps muffled by the plush carpet, trench coat drifting behind him like stage curtain silk. The host does not offer to take his coat. The host recognizes certain kinds of silhouettes, knows better than to slow them down. Mia blinks. The booth is suddenly an empty frame, spotlighted by a single pendant lamp. The napkin lies folded under the spoon, ink still wet. She reaches. 3 lines of script curve across the soft paper. "The greatest gifts come unnoticed. MJ." Her mouth tightens. No tip, just ink. Gratitude knots with anger, and for an instant she contemplates marching after him to demand cash the old-fashioned way. Pride wins. She crushes the napkin into her fist, tosses it into the bus tub, and returns to the waiter's station. By 11:30, tables are cleared, candles snuffed, and the maitre d' signs the tip pool envelopes with an apology. Only $42 to split among 3 servers. Mia pockets $15 and wonders if she can stretch condensed milk again without her daughter noticing. Back in her apartment after midnight, she lowers a sleeping child into bed. The girl's braids still damp from bath water because hot water pipes rattled out at 5 p.m. Mia steps into the kitchen where the fridge light flickers over sparse shelves. 2 eggs, half a stick of butter wrapped in foil, a bottle of ketchup, and a lone apple beginning to wrinkle. She sighs, then remembers the napkin. She salvaged it from the tub on a whim, sliding it into her apron's hidden pocket between shifts. Now she unfolds it under the overhead bulb. The initials are distinctive. A swooping M that crosses itself twice. A J whose tail stretches bashfully leftward. She has spent enough late nights folding laundry in front of MTV to recognize that autograph. Her pulse skips. She sinks onto the cracked vinyl stool, electricity prickling her scalp at the idea she stood inches from an icon and never saw him. She checks the back of the napkin. Blank. No phone number, no secret map to fortunes. Just a sentence and an oversized signature. Yet reading it again, she feels something shift, as though the cramped kitchen stretches wider. She does not believe in magic, but she does believe in timing, and the thought that Michael Jackson of all people noticed her need and chose words instead of money twists her frustration into restless curiosity. The greatest gifts come unnoticed. The line plays in her head like a hook she can't shake. She tucks the napkin behind a chipped ceramic sugar bowl on the counter. Dawn will come, rent will still be due, and milk will still cost more than she has. But tonight, with the L train rattling like far-off tambourines and her child breathing steadily through the door, Mia Robinson allows herself one reckless swallow of hope. A bruise-colored dawn leaked between the slats of Mia's bedroom blinds when the pounding began. Not the usual concerto of delivery trucks and impatient car horns, but a single, polite knock that repeated every 7 seconds. Firm, measured, and, somehow, expectant. She wrapped her robe tighter, stole a glance at her daughter, still cocooned beneath a pink quilt, and opened the door a cautious inch. A man in a walnut-brown 3-piece suit stood on the landing, tie pinned with a tiny pearl. He carried neither clipboard nor package, only a slim leather folio tucked beneath one arm. "Miss Robinson?" His accent rolled the vowels as if he had polished them. Without waiting for assent, he produced a photograph, holding it at chest height, the way a diplomat displays credentials. The image captured last night's booth in the Starlight Room. Dim amber light, Mia leaning forward, and, though the angle preserved his anonymity, an unmistakable tilt of fedora hiding the face of Michael Jackson. The stranger didn't accuse, demand, or even explain. He simply observed the flicker of recognition widen Mia's pupils, then offered her the folio. Inside lay an unsealed envelope, thick with currency, scenting the air with the faint metallic tang of fresh ink. 5 crisp $100 bills, fanned out like playing cards. Beside them, a note on cream stationery. "Don't be afraid to ask for what you need. M." No surname, no second initial, only that lone consonant balanced on the edge of invitation. Below the signature, a telephone number printed in block digits, followed by a single instruction in smaller hand. "Call only when you have something real to say." Blood thundered in Mia's ears. She could smell the glue in the envelope, feel the weight of rent notices fluttering like moths behind her. Yet the meticulous penmanship unnerved her more than the money. She lifted her gaze, but the suited courier was already descending the stairs, soles silent on worn treads. By the time she leaned over the banister, he had vanished into the humid morning haze puddling over Lenox Avenue. The subway ride to Midtown felt shorter than usual, though every station replayed the encounter in her head like a scene she couldn't recast. At the Starlight Room, She slipped into place 5 minutes before call time. The maitre d', Mr. Renwick, who prided himself on reading moods the way sommeliers read tannins, eyed her flushed cheeks with cool curiosity, but said nothing. Lunch was brisk, a corporate banquet, devouring chicken roulades and leaving gossip-tinted bones. Mia moved as if choreographed. Pour, clear, smile. Yet the envelope grazed her hip through the pocket of her apron, an anchor dragging focus. Between orders, she rehearsed what she might tell a voice on the other end of that secret line, and every draft felt simultaneously too small and too enormous. At 3:20, the dining room emptied. Sunlight slanted across linen, scattering diamond-bright reflections from half-polished wineglasses. The telephone behind the host's desk rang, a private line reserved for bookings far above her pay grade. Renwick answered, modulated his tone into velvet, and listened. Mia collected Demitasse cups just within earshot and heard fragments. "Yes, sir." Impeccable discretion. "The young lady?" "Quite reliable." A pause. "Understood." Another pause. "Consider it done." He replaced the receiver with ceremonial care and turned. "Miss Robinson, a moment, please." She froze, saucers tilting. Renwick's expression was unreadable, not reproachful, not congratulatory, merely clinical, as though he'd been asked to confirm her pulse. "Management would like to expand your duties. Starting Monday, you'll train as assistant floor supervisor. Uniform allowance, small salary bump, and a key to the liquor cabinet." His mouth curved in what passed for encouragement. "Someone in high places is impressed by your composure." She nodded, gratitude snagging on suspicion. Renwick withdrew to his ledger, and Mia slipped into the staff corridor, pressing her back against cool plaster. The promotion, the cash, the number, pieces of an unseen arrangement slotting into place. Logic dictated relief. More money meant stability. Yet her stomach coiled. Nothing in life arrived without a purchase price, least of all charity from legends. After clock out, she detoured through Central Park, where early spring buds quivered in a breeze still scented with last month's frost. Parents pushed strollers along the mall. Saxophones busked near Bethesda Terrace. She sat on a bench facing the lake, the envelope open on her lap, bills impossibly clean against the flaking green paint. 10 feet away, an elderly couple shared a pretzel, salt crystals catching wan sunlight. Mia pictured buying groceries without rationing pennies, pictured her daughter's giggles splashing inside a bathtub filled above the stingy halfway mark. Freedom had a smell, she realized. Warm bread, honest soap, and maybe lilacs on payday Saturdays. Yet the phone number burned like lemon juice on paper-cut skin. Call only when you have something real to say. What counted as real to a man who spent stadium nights hearing millions scream his name? Milk and cough syrup seemed unforgivably small. She folded the note until it formed a tight square and slid it into the envelope with the cash. Decision deferred. Evening shift brought a flicker of déjà vu. The logbook again showed Mr. Jones, party of one. But at 7 the elevator opened to reveal no trench coat, no fedora, only a tourist family who misread the dress code and backed out apologetically. Mia's muscles unclenched. Still, she sensed cameras behind every downlight, imagined reporters stitching narratives from her every breath. She checked reflections in mirrored panels for lurking lenses, found only her own tense posture. After closing, she lingered, wiping silverware slower than necessary. Renwick emerged, coat on arm. "Good night, assistant," he said, tone teasing yet oddly respectful, and left. She locked the service entrance, stepped into a corridor perfumed by floor wax, and nearly collided with sous chef Benito, whose grin flashed like a camera bulb. "Heard the news, superstar," he said. "Don't forget us on your way up." She forced a laugh, pocketing jealousy-coated congratulations. The subway home was crowded. Teenagers blasted boomboxes. Elders grumbled about rent hikes. The envelope's weight felt conspicuous, as though everyone saw through canvas and desire straight to the serial numbers. She kept one hand on her bag strap until 125th Street. On the sidewalk, streetlights sputtered gold halos around puddles. She hurried, keys ready, lungs tight. Inside, she found her daughter colored a crayon rainbow across a torn catalog page. The sight pierced her heart with urgent tenderness. While the child chattered about skyscraper-tall monsters and unicorn rescues, Mia weighed the luxury of certainty against the dignity of distance. She kissed a forehead smelling faintly of talcum powder and tucked the girl into blankets stitched by a grandmother who believed thread could ward off nightmares. At the kitchen table, Mia spread the 5 bills like tarot. She imagined dialing the number, a polite assistant patching her through, that soft feather voice asking, "What do you need, Mia?" And she pictured answering, "I need my life to make sense again." Real enough? Perhaps. But truth carried obligations, and she was not yet sure which ones he would claim. She slid the money back into the envelope, sealed it, and hid it beneath loose floorboards beneath the sink. Decision postponed. Not denied. The number she copied onto the inside flap of a recipe book between cornbread and carrot soufflé, secrets seasoned among spices. Then she stood by the window, Harlem lights twinkling like patient constellations, and listened to the phone that did not ring. Its silence louder than applause, promising both salvation and peril in the same breath. The telephone shattered the hush at 2:11 a.m. 3 clipped chimes that trembled through the apartment like stones skittering across a frozen pond. Mia was still at the kitchen window, sleepless, forehead tipped against cool glass, when the sound jolted her spine straight. She stared at the receiver as though it were a living thing, half expecting it to sprout claws. The second ring cut shorter than the first. On the third, she snatched the handset, pulse bumping in her throat. "Miss Robinson." The voice was baritone silk, measured, unobtrusive, every consonant ironed perfectly flat. Not Michael, but someone accustomed to representing him. "Yes." "My name is Charles Hathaway. I act on behalf of Mr. M. He would appreciate a conversation, somewhere private, at your convenience. Might tomorrow evening suit?" Mia swallowed. Her tongue felt too large for her mouth. My daughter. We can arrange for a licensed sitter," Hathaway said, anticipating the objection. "All vetted, all discreet. A car will collect you at 6. He named her address with unerring precision, thanked her, and ended the call before she formed another syllable. For the next 20 hours, her apartment became a clock without hands. Every task, brushing her daughter's hair, ironing the upgraded supervisor blouse, hung inside a pocket of unreal pause. Fear marked the edges, but a humming undercurrent of possibility drowned it out. She rehearsed imaginary dialogues while stocking condiments on the lunchtime floor, kept flubbing simple math, and caught herself smiling at empty air. At 5:45, she kissed her drowsy child, met the arriving sitter, an older woman radiating nurse-like competence, and stepped into dusk where a black Cadillac Fleetwood idled, chrome gleaming under the street lamp. The back seat smelled of cedar and faint citrus. Windows were tinted dark enough to turn Harlem's rush into an abstract film of light and shadows. Hathaway sat opposite, a silhouette against leather, hands folded atop a slender briefcase. His suit tonight was midnight blue, pocket square the color of moonstone. He did not fill the ride with chatter. Instead, he clicked a tape into the dashboard deck. Strings unfurled. Chaplin's smile, instrumental, gentle enough to hush even engine hum. Mia's ribs tightened around the melody, half remembering her mother humming it while warming milk on a stove she now wished she'd kept. Traffic thinned beyond the Triborough Bridge. Streetlights surrendered to sprawling trees and the occasional gated driveway. Westchester County, she guessed. The air smelled less of exhaust, more of damp soil warming under spring. 25 minutes later, the Cadillac turned past stone pillars into a gravel lane bordered by yew hedges pruned within an inch of geometry. At the crest of a rise, a manor revealed itself. Federal style, ivory siding, black shutters, veranda columns wrapped in climbing roses, not yet in bloom. 2 lanterns framed the door, casting honeyed pools across flagstones. Hathaway escorted her through a vestibule lined with sepia photographs, silent movies, contortionists, a marionette troupe. No servants appeared, only low lamplight and the ticking of a mantel clock somewhere nearby. Straight ahead, Hathaway murmured, nodding toward double pocket doors. He stepped aside, leaving her alone. Mia slid one door open. Music met her first, the same smile, now breathing from an upright piano in the room's center. A figure sat there, slender shoulders silhouetted against a bank of mullioned windows. Hands drifted over keys with the softness of gliding swans, never striking, merely brushing. Yet each note sounded full, warm, impossibly sure. He wore no hat tonight. Curls framed his face in miniature spirals, and the famous sunglasses rested atop the piano's lacquer, abandoned. He sensed her before seeing her, tapering the phrase, letting it resolve. When silence settled, he turned with an unhurried grace, eyes wide and deliberate, as though he were half convinced she might vanish if startled. Light caught on a tiny crystal brooch at his collar. 2 clasped hands. Mia's throat refused words. She only dipped her head in greeting. He gestured to a wing-back chair angled beside the instrument. "Would you sit?" The voice was soft enough to make the room feel too large. She obeyed, fingers brushing upholstery that smelled faintly of lavender sachets. They stayed like that for a span, unattached to clocks. He leaning on the piano lid, she perched on the edge of cushion, both enfolded by hush so pure the house seemed to hold its breath. At last he asked, almost shyly, "What did you hope to buy with $5? The question uncorked something raw. "Milk," she said. "For my daughter. She's 4. We were out." Michael closed his eyes, as though absorbing not just the words but the spaces around them. The fatigue, the budgeting gymnastics, the nights she diluted condensed milk with tap water. When he opened them again, a soft shine lingered, equal parts empathy and quiet sorrow. He didn't speak. Instead, he reached over the music stand, pulled a blank sheet of manuscript paper, and folded it into a precise triangle. He slid it across the piano top until it rested within her reach. Written on one inside flap, in that same looping hand, was a single phrase. "Always ask for the chorus, never just the verse." She frowned, not understanding. He smiled, serene. "Verses tell stories," he whispered. "Choruses change them." Then, with childlike solemnity, he pressed both palms together as if sealing a pact and swiveled back to the keys. The opening bars of Moon River drifted out, tender as lullaby. Hathaway re-entered exactly when the last chord dissolved. "Miss Robinson, the car is ready." It felt too soon, as if time had been clipped, but when Mia glanced at the clock above the fireplace, she discovered nearly 2 hours had splintered away. Michael walked her to the foyer. They passed under a crystal pendant lamp, whose facets scattered rainbows across his cheek. At the threshold, he hesitated, fished something from his pocket. A plastic figurine of a tiny elephant, paint chipped around the ears. "Luck," he said simply, pressing it into her hand. Then he stepped back, offered a bow more courtly than ironic, and watched as the door closed between them. The ride home unfolded beneath a silver coin moon. No music this time. Hathaway offered a polite nod but kept silent, sensing her mind was crowded. When they reached Lenox Avenue, Mia thanked him. He surprised her by responding, "He hears what most people dismiss." Before she could answer, the car slid away, tail lights blinking through the midnight river of traffic. Inside the apartment, she found the sitter reading nursery rhymes to her daughter, who dozed on the sofa curled like a comma. After farewells and payment, Mia carried the child to bed, inhaling the steady vanilla-warm breath that always calmed her nerves. Only once the apartment sank into hush did she remember to open the refrigerator for a night glass of water. Light spilled over abundance, gallon jugs of milk lined 3 deep, cartons of eggs stacked like ivory bricks, butter, yogurt, oranges, chicken, even imported Belgian chocolate she'd once tasted on a co-worker's birthday. Every shelf brimmed. A chill tore through her legs, not from the cold air, but from the precision. Someone knew brand preferences she had never spoken aloud. She pivoted to the kitchen table. A plain white envelope lay atop it, addressed in typewriter font, "Robinson Amaya, Pediatric Group Plan Confirmation." Inside, documentation of full medical coverage, premium prepaid in quarterly installments by an entity called the J. Angel Foundation. She stumbled back into a chair, the floor tilting. Tears arrived quietly, neither joyful nor sorrowful, more akin to a pressure valve finally venting. The figurine still warmed her palm. She set it beside the paperwork. Dawn's earliest light crept through blinds, painting gold bars across the table. Outside, garbage trucks clanged, and a radio somewhere on the street surfaced with Whitney Houston's voice, promising to run to someone. Mia exhaled a quivering laugh. For the first time in years, tomorrow did not feel like a siege. It felt like the second bar of a song she had almost forgotten, one where the chorus was waiting, vast and bright, just a breath beyond the verse. Late April's rain slanted across Manhattan like thrown needles, needling awnings, slicking windshields, drawing steam from subway vents. Mia stood beneath the marquee of the Starlight Room, umbrella forgotten at home, collar soaking up each cold sting, and wondered when the city had begun whispering her name. 10 minutes earlier she had stepped off the service elevator into a lobby bristling with flashbulbs. 3 men and a woman, camera lenses like dark, unblinking eyes, blocked the host stand. "Did Mr. Jackson leave you a love note, Ms. Robinson? Is it true? He bought your kid a condo?" "Ma'am, look this way. Just one shot." Their voices overlapped, hungry, polite only in grammar. Mia's knees thudded, but her training as a singer who once craved spotlights made her spine refuse to bow. She breathed through the clamor, felt Renwick's hand appear at her elbow, and together they shepherded her past the barrage into the dining room's dim sanctuary. Even there, camera strobes still pulsed behind eyelids that refused to close. Renwick locked the glass doors, then turned the deadbolt inside the mahogany frame, something he had never done in daylight hours. His gaze flicked to her face. "Someone leaked," he said, voice even. "Until we manage the fallout, you'll take a week's leave. Paid." "I can still work." "Clients expect discretion, not tabloids." He softened. Take your daughter somewhere bright. Hide the umbrellas. Mia wanted to protest, but two truths crushed resistance. First, a leave in hospitality often signaled polite dismissal. Second, outside the windows, lenses still glinted like minnows in murky water. She nodded, throat pulling tight. On the subway home, she found her photo already printed in ink. A passenger's folded daily news displayed a grainy half-page. Mia in profile at the Starlight piano 2 nights earlier. Michael's shoulder just entering frame. Headline: Who is the Milk Money Muse? She fought the urge to snatch the paper, tear it to ribbons, scream that milk was not a punchline. Instead, she exited 2 stops early and walked the rest of the distance in drizzle that erased tears before they fell. The next morning, a detective warmth sun broke through. Seeking normality, Mia took Amaya to Morningside Park. Mothers traded coupons on nearby benches. A trio of teenagers practiced double dutch under budding sycamores. Amaya shrieked happy nonsense atop the slide, while Mia rehearsed her new role, bodyguard. Every passing stroller looked suspect. When she blinked, flashbulbs popped in memory. When she opened her eyes, a man in a ball cap lingered by the fence, pretending to read yesterday's sports section upside down. She coaxed Amaya toward the carousel, but before they reached its chipped horses, the capped man moved. His path intersected theirs too neatly. Shadows pooled under his eyes, and though his smile was lined with courtesy, his handshake with the girl's coat zipper felt possessive. "Cute kid," he said. Click. Something metallic snapped in his fist, a camera shutter disguised in the blink of a toy keyring. Mia yanked Amaya back, heartbeat ricocheting. 20 feet away, a woman fussed with a stroller that had no baby inside. Mirror on its canopy trained their direction. Mia scooped her daughter, sprinted toward Amsterdam Avenue, hailed the first cab despite short cash. Only when they lurched away did her pulse slow from hammer to snare. Home felt no safer. 2 phone calls came before dusk. Both disconnected the instant she answered. The third rang just after she bolted the chain lock. Mia? The voice, hushed velvet, unmistakable. Michael? I'm sorry. Silences trembled between syllables. They were not meant to find you. How did they? People sell secrets. A sigh fluttered across the line, as frail as wings. You must leave the city. There's a house in Encino. My staff can arrange tomorrow night. Say yes. Parquet creaked under Mia's restless pacing. She glanced at Amaya coloring on the rug. Purple crayon sky. Green elephant marching below. The figurine from that strange evening sat beside her daughter's knee. Leave New York? Abandon shifts? Messengered pay envelopes? The childhood stoop that held echoes of games from another decade? And yet flashbulbs, pursuers, lurking strangers. New York had abandoned her first. I need 24 hours, she whispered. 1 call. The car will come. Please be ready. He paused, then softer. You deserve a chorus, remember? The line clicked silent, leaving only the dial tone's distant ocean roar. Later that night, an envelope without a stamp slid beneath her door. Inside, block letters cut from tabloids. Stay quiet, or the kid sings for ransom. A Polaroid of Amaya at today's park taped below. No postmark, meaning delivered by hand, likely while she had dozed on the couch between nightmares. Sleep abandoned her altogether. She brewed coffee and sat vigil until dawn, listening for creaks, the elevator's groan, sirens that might camouflage other footsteps. The city's early chatter, street vendors, roosters from a backyard coop 2 buildings over, felt suddenly fragile, like tin toys wound too tight. Past noon, a knock sounded. 2 quick taps, then 3. She flinched, clutched the broom handle as if it were a spear. Renwick's voice floated through the door. "Only me." He entered holding today's Post. Front page screaming, "Jacko's secret sweetheart." The photo caught Mia mid-stride outside her building from 2 evenings prior. Shopping bag of milk visible, expression weary. Renwick removed his glasses, polishing lenses longer than necessary. Publicity's poison around here. Management has to think of investors. "I'm fired." On paper, mutual separation. He offered a severance envelope she did not open, though she sensed the sum would be mercifully decent and unbearably small. When he left, Mia's apartment shrank until walls pressed against lungs. She dialed Hathaway's private number with stiff fingers. 1 ring. "Yes, Miss Robinson," he answered, ready. "Tell him we'll come." Evening slid into place. She packed essentials: Amaya's birth certificate, 2 photo albums, the elephant charm, the note Michael had folded like origami hope, and the recorded demo tape of the only song she still believed in. Outside, dusk draped Harlem's cornices purple. The promised car, a cream Lincoln limousette this time, idled with hazard lights blinking slow heartbeat. A female driver nodded, helped buckle Amaya's booster, closed the door with librarian gentleness. As the city receded, Mia watched neon signs blur into comet tails. Each bridge they crossed felt like a paragraph break, language changing. Across the back seat, her daughter slept, fingers curled around the plastic elephant. Mia laid her palm over the child's chest, felt the small drum of life, and let the motion of escape rock both their fears. Only when New Jersey's refineries flickered behind them like distant funeral candles did Mia allow her eyelids to lower. For the first time since bells above the restaurant door had spilled paparazzi into her orbit, sleep came not as ambush, but as surrender. Uneasy, yes, but threaded with a resolve tempered in spotlight glare and mother fire. Whatever waited in California, she would meet it singing the chorus full voice, because verses alone could no longer guard the quiet. Rain had followed the limousine all the way to Teterboro, then given up somewhere over the Midwest, but Mia still carried its metallic smell in her collar when the Gulf Stream began its moonlit descent. The cabin lights were dimmed to a faint amber glow. Amaya's head rested on Mia's thigh, curls fluttering each time the pressurized air vents sighed. Across the aisle, Charles Hathaway closed the folder he had been reading, snapped his Mont Blanc into its sheath, and offered Mia a single nod that was less reassurance than acknowledgement of the cliff they were about to step onto together. Outside the oval window, Los Angeles sprawled like spilled circuitry. Boulevards pulsing neon, sodium lamps clustering in grids that looked orderly only from 4,500 feet. The wheels kissed tarmac so gently, Mia wondered if she had imagined it. Then reverse thrusters boomed and every rivet in the fuselage shuddered. In that instant, she realized she was farther from Harlem than she had ever been. Not just in miles, but in the logic that had ruled her life until 48 hours ago. A sedan, pale gold, windows obsidian, waited at a private hangar. Warm night air smelled of eucalyptus and jet fuel. 2 security staff in plain navy suits loaded their luggage without a word. When the driver eased onto the 405, Mia glimpsed the city center's distant skyline, trembling in heat distortions even at midnight. Billboards flashed sneakers and soda. 100 radio frequencies collided whenever the car crested an overpass, yet the interior remained insulated, cushioned by soft jazz that seemed selected to leave room for thought. They exited in the San Fernando Valley, where the hills folded in on themselves, and 10 minutes later, electric gates parted to admit them onto a landscaped lane bordered by pepper trees. The main residence, colonial symmetry, cream stucco, shutters the color of deep lake water, was visible only in quick flashes through foliage. The car continued past it, to a smaller guest house half hidden by bougainvillea. Its porch light glowed amber, not the bleached security white Mia associated with wealth. Someone had chosen warmth over wattage. Inside, morning fresh linens, a bowl of peaches, and framed watercolors of hummingbirds greeted her. A note lay on the dresser in the same looping script she now recognized without question. Rest as long as you like. Breakfast, when the birds decide. M. She tucked Amaya beneath a quilt patterned with citrus branches, kissed the soft dip above her daughter's brow, and let exhaustion fold her into the armchair. Sleep came in choppy increments. 30 minutes of oblivion. A flinch at a phantom camera flash. Another drift into half-dream where subway brakes screeched and turned into ocean surf. When the actual dawn slipped under the shades, it was lemon-colored and full of unseen finch song. A housekeeper named Rosa delivered coffee and a shy smile, then guided Mia along a flagstone path fragrant with rosemary to the main villa. The front door was already open, as though the house breathed outward. In the foyer, a brass pendulum clock counted seconds so slowly they felt stretched. Hathaway waited, but only long enough to gesture toward a corridor paneled in honeyed walnut. At the far end, French doors stood ajar. The room beyond was neither studio nor office, but something between. One wall a mosaic of framed snapshots, another stacked floor to ceiling with journals, spiral notebooks, cloth-bound diaries, composition pads with corners worn to fuzz. Sunlight scattered across parquet, highlighting dust motes that drifted like slow snow. Michael sat cross-legged on a Persian rug, back against a low bookshelf, reading glasses perched precariously on the tip of his nose. Gone were glove, hat, and aviators. He wore a charcoal Henley and gray sweatpants, attire so ordinary it felt startling, as though the concept of icon had been peeled off and folded away. When he looked up, the smile that reached her was understated, almost apologetic. "Good morning, Mia." His voice, absent the stage's push of air, was conversational, carrying faint rasp, evidence of late-night rehearsals or sleepless worry. She could not tell. She answered with a nod, stepping further in. Close, he seemed both younger and older. Cheeks still smooth, but eyes ringed faintly violet, the color of thunderstorms seen from far offshore. "I wanted to show you where the noise stops," he said, gesturing at the journals. "Here, no security codes, no studio clocks, just pages nobody edits." He rose with dancer economy and crossed to a credenza where several notebooks lay open. On one page, childish stick figures formed a chain beneath the heading Hospital Ward, Munich, 1988. Beside each drawing a note. Likes cherry jelly. Had never seen a kite. Asked if music can cure bone. Another journal contained lists of voices, names of children who had sent him letters. Some entries simply read, "Wants to go home?" Others rambled into anecdotes about console games and favorite ice cream flavors. Mia felt the weight of 1,000 hotel lobbies, 1,000 paparazzi barricades between those lines. What startled her was the absence of self-pity. Every paragraph tilted outward toward other people's need. Michael watched her read, thumb worrying the edge of one page, but not turning it. "When the curtain falls," he said quietly, "nobody reminds you to applaud the silence. You either learn to sit with it, or you drown." She closed the notebook with care. "The world thinks silence is your choice," she said. "They imagine you disappear because you're eccentric, not because you run out of hiding places." He exhaled, one soft burst tinged with relief, at being understood without translation. Then he tilted his head, curly hair grazing collar. "Tell me something true that you've never said on a record." Mia considered. Truths lined up. The audition she walked out on when the producer's hand drifted, the rent envelope she once padded with grocery coupons, the melody she had stopped humming after Amaya's father left. She chose the smallest one. "I hate applause," she confessed. "It sounds like a door slamming shut. Like now that you've clapped, the conversation's over." A slow grin unfurled on his mouth. "Exactly." He turned, beckoning. "Come. There's something else." They moved through a hall scented with lemon oil to a modest room half the size of the foyer. A surprise in a mansion of grand spaces. Here, the walls were papered entirely in photographs. Not glamorous portraits, but 4x6 prints tacked unframed. Children in wheelchairs beaming at balloon animals, girls clutching autograph books, toddlers asleep under crocheted blankets. Colors had begun to fade on some, edges curled. Near the center hung a picture Mia recognized instantly. Amaya, age 3, chasing pigeons across Morningside asphalt last summer. The composition was perfect, pigeons mid-lift creating a halo of motion. She remembered no photographer that day, only the vendors scooping Italian ice and the neighbor kid with a boombox. Blood surged in her ears. She stepped forward, voice low but vibrating. "You had someone follow us?" Michael's shoulders curled, apology preempting words. "I waited. You never called. I worried. I sent a team to make sure she was safe." "That's not care. That's surveillance." "I know." He touched a photo of a bald boy high-fiving him in a hospital gown. "My compass is skewed. Fame warps distance. Everything closer than a stage light feels dangerous. So I measure love with security budgets. I don't know how to protect without watching." Mia folded arms against a chill the California sun could not offset. "Protection isn't ownership," she said. Her voice was softer than her words, a compromise between fury and the empathy she could not unlearn. He nodded, throat bobbing. "I'm learning the difference. Too slowly, maybe." For a long minute, only the grandfather clock down the hall spoke. Then he turned, lifting a Polaroid camera from a nearby shelf. He held it out like a peace offering. "Would you take one of me? For you to keep. No copies. A picture you control." Mia hesitated, then accepted the camera, framed him in the modest light. He removed his glasses, let his arms hang untouched by choreographer's instruction, eyes meeting lens without armor. The shutter clicked. The photograph slid out warm and damp with developing chemicals. She waved it in the air, watching the ghost of his features clarify into color. Human. Exposed. But by his own consent. He broke the silence first. "I can't give you a normal friendship. The scaffolding around my life won't permit it. But I can offer honesty and space. Tell me where I overstep, and I'll retreat." Mia studied the Polaroid now fully developed, edges turning from gray to white. "Honesty, then," she said. "I'll stay a little while, but my daughter stays invisible. No hidden cameras, no file dossiers. If I see another photo I didn't authorize, that's the end." Relief softened his features. "Agreed." He extended a pinky, boyish as though sealing playground vows. She looped her finger through his, absurd formality making them both laugh, a brittle sound at first that widened into genuine ease. Later, Rosa served lunch on the veranda. Roasted vegetables, cilantro rice, mango slices cold enough to fog their dishes. Amaya appeared, shy at first, yet soon delighted by the hummingbirds' dive-bombing feeders. Michael kept distance, content to watch from a wicker chair. bare feet tucked beneath him. The afternoon unspooled slowly. Chalk drawings on slate tiles, a duet of bubble-blowing lessons, and, when dusk bled across the valley, an impromptu sing-around at the old upright in the guest-house parlor. Mia leading, Michael harmonizing so gently the notes seemed to come from the walls themselves. But when mother and daughter returned to their quarters, a new envelope rested against the door. No stamp, no handwriting. Inside, only a single newspaper clipping from that morning's Los Angeles Herald, a headline predicting a major expose on Michael's secret life, scheduled to run the following week. Across the text, a felt-tip message. Every mask shatters under heat. Yours will too. Mia's fingers tightened until the paper creased. Behind her, the guest house lamps painted long double shadows that reached toward the villa. She understood then that whatever piece they had borrowed was on countdown. Yet recalling the Polaroid in her pocket, his unguarded gaze offering ownership of at least one narrative, she felt a faint, stubborn resolve bloom. Masks might crack, mirrors might distort, but some images, once claimed, stayed true. Gray afternoon haze draped the Santa Susana foothills like gauze, filtering the sun to a dull disk and making every security light on the property seem prematurely bright. Mia first saw the man in the gray suit while pinning Amaya's watercolor attempts to the guest house fridge. Through the kitchen window, beyond the rose arbor, a figure leaned against the perimeter fence as though merely admiring bougainvillea. He wore department store neutrality, gray on gray, yet held himself with the coiled patience of someone clocking intervals. When Mia blinked, a gardener's cart rumbled between them. By the time it passed, the fence line was empty except for drifting eucalyptus leaves. She told herself he was a delivery driver looking for the service gate. But 20 minutes later, escorting Amaya to the playground of cypress stumps at the rear of the villa, she spotted the same silhouette half hidden behind a pepper tree, wrist lifted to camera height before dropping away. Mia's pulse stuttered. Memories of paparazzi ambushes in Central Park slammed into the warm California air, making it taste metallic. She ushered her daughter back inside, heart drumming hard enough to blur her vision. Michael arrived within 10 minutes of Hathaway's phone call. No limousine entrance, no entourage, just the hush of his soft-soled shoes crossing the tile. He listened as Mia described the gray man, then turned to his chief of security, Joel, a former Secret Service agent whose earpiece looked like translucent seaweed curled inside his lobe. Full perimeter, overlapping zones, round the clock, Michael instructed, voice stripped of its usual lilting softness. Anyone without clearance comes nowhere near the fence. Joel nodded, already relaying orders into a mic at his cuff. Motion detectors would double. Infrared cameras would sweep the hills past midnight. But Mia felt none of the relief she imagined such vigilance should bring. Safety purchased at the cost of siege tasted too much like gilded captivity. The call came that night, slipping past newly installed encryption as easily as fog through a screen door. Mia was braiding Amaya's hair for bed when the phone on the nightstand jingled. No caller ID, only a Midwest area code she did not recognize. She answered, reluctant to let the ring wake the child. A breath, 3 beats long, hissed against the receiver. Then a gravelly male voice, pitched like late-night shock radio whispers, "He did it to others. You're next." Static swallowed any chance for questions. The line died. Mia stared at the silent handset until Amaya tugged her sleeve, confused by the blench of her mother's face. That single sentence drummed behind Mia's ribs all night, louder than cicadas, louder than the distant canyon coyotes. By sunrise, she half expected it had been a nightmare, But Joel confirmed an untraceable call pinged off a cell tower near Studio City at 8:09 p.m. "Sheer luck we caught it. They spoofed your number on a rotating SIM," he said, jaw clenched. "Expect escalation." Escalation arrived faster than even security protocols anticipated. 3 days later, while Amaya practiced chalk letters on the flagstones, cable news crawlers erupted with breaking banners. Family of California teenager files civil lawsuit alleging sexual misconduct by pop icon Michael Jackson. Reporters camped at the property gate before the afternoon sun hit zenith. Helicopters thudded overhead, tilting for oblique shots of terracotta roofs. The gray-suit man appeared again, now openly filming through chain link, his camcorder's red LED unblinking. Michael called an emergency meeting in the villa's music room, its walls muffled by acoustic baffles that made voices sound as intimate as secrets. His hands trembled as he passed Mia a copy of the filed complaint. Typewritten allegations filled 11 pages, phrases like inappropriate contact and emotional manipulation, leaping out like barbed hooks. Mia's stomach flipped at the clinical ugliness. "I swear on every song I've ever sung, none of it is true," Michael said, voice frayed. "But the court of cameras is already in session." Within hours, Mia's phone was a hive. Subpoenas from Los Angeles Superior Court. Messages from a crisis PR firm she'd never heard of. Voicemail invitations from talk show producers dangling 5-figure appearance fees. The most devastating ring came from a number she hadn't dialed in a decade. "Kiddo?" The voice of her father, once baritone strong, now hollowed by cigarettes and rust. He skipped pleasantries. "New York Post wanted background. I said you were a smart girl but soft-hearted. Told them you'd outgrow this circus." Mia absorbed the words like paper-soaking kerosene. "You spoke to them." "Only the truth. You're no match for that world. They paid for lunch. Nothing wrong with that." When she hung up, memory panned back to 12-year-old Mia, clutching her first microphone, while her father boasted to neighbors she'd be bigger than Diana Ross. Now he auctioned the debris of her privacy for pastrami on rye. Headlines metastasized overnight. "Father says daughter not fit for King of Pop." Waitress whisperer couldn't save him. Paparazzi unearthed Amaya's preschool address and staked out the gates. Michael's team relocated mother and child to a secondary safe house in Malibu. A low-slung glass structure balanced on stilts above waves that gnawed the shore like restless teeth. Beautiful, yes, but Mia lay awake listening to surf torch the sand, and wondered if ocean or flashbulb glare made her feel more isolated. On television, commentators dissected every archived clip of Michael hugging fans, looping freeze frames to assign sinister motive. Mia muted the set, but captions still crawled. Body language experts suggest predatory intimacy. The words scrolled beneath footage of a hospital visit where Michael handed a teddy bear to a bald child. The cruelty of recontextualization churned Mia's gut. Then came the subpoena bearing her name. She was to give deposition regarding the defendant's patterns of behavior toward minors and female associates. A note from Michael's attorney pleaded cooperation, yet cautioned she would be deposed by plaintiff counsel, eager to exploit any hint of impropriety. Mia pictured wood-paneled legal chambers, battery of microphones, her sincerity parsed into yes or no boxes. The notion of choosing each word knowing ellipses could be carved around it made her throat tighten. That evening she found Michael alone in the Malibu studio, gazing through a wall of glass at horizon where sun bled into ocean. He wore headphones, but no music played. When Mia approached, he slid them off, eyes red-rimmed. I wanted to build a place children could enter without fear, he murmured. Now every carousel horse looks like a Trojan coffin. She touched his sleeve. They're rewriting you in real time. But truth has stamina. It outlasts spin, even if it limps. He managed a brittle smile. You speak like a hymn. I speak like a waitress who learned to read tips and lies equally fast. Hathaway entered with a folder marked Asterisk Press Strategy Asterisk. Michael straightened. There'll be a statement tomorrow. Live, he said, turning to Mia. I can't ask you to stand beside me. They'd shred you. Mia shook her head. Standing near you isn't the risk. Standing near their cameras is. I'll watch from here. She almost added, and I'll hate every ocean inch that keeps me away. But the sentence lodged behind her teeth. The next day, Mia rose at dawn, settled Amaya with crayons, and positioned herself before the television. Cameras panned a hotel ballroom in Century City, packed shoulder to shoulder with journalists. Michael stepped to the microphone in a dark suit, skin wax pale under spotlights. He read a prepared statement. I am saddened, deeply hurt. I will fight these disgusting allegations with the last ounce of my strength. His voice cracked on innocent. He paused, swallowing hard, then finished. Cassette shutters clicked. A reporter shouted a question about payouts. Security ushered Michael off stage. The broadcast cut back to anchor commentary before his shadow cleared the curtain. Mia sat motionless, nails half-moons in her palms. The defense sounded sincere, but on screen sincerity looked no firmer than mist. She understood, painfully, that cameras reduced nuance to pixels, and pixels could be rearranged by editors into any narrative the audience was thirsty to sip. That night, Gray Suit Man reappeared at the edge of the surf, pants cuffed against foam. Flash popped once, twice. Security patrols chased him, but sand obscured footprints, and he vanished among boulders. In the morning, a package waited on the porch. Inside, an 8x10 glossy of Mia stooping to adjust Amaya's sandal, taken moments before the flashbulb burst. Across the bottom, someone had scrawled in red Sharpie, "He can't even protect himself." Mia burned the photograph in the fireplace, but the smoke carried the words through the house long after flames died. That scent of charred emulsion lingered in her clothes, her dreams, turning each exhale into a reminder that the stranger's voice, singular, malign, had multiplied at the speed of rumor, and now spoke through every antenna, every gossip diner, every courthouse step. She knelt beside her sleeping child, traced the delicate shell of a small ear, and made a vow no microphone would ever record. If silence is the only shield left, I will wield it like steel. Yet even as she whispered it, she wondered whether silence itself had been commandeered, whether any quiet corner remained unmapped by lenses, unbugged by telephoto greed. Outside, Pacific waves erased footprints as quickly as they formed, but daylight would bring new ones, and Mia's path, once a simple two-step between table service and lullaby, now threaded a minefield where every move, every breath, might trigger another detonation none of them could outrun. Smoke from the photograph still souring her throat, Mia boarded the Red Eye east with nothing but a duffel, a medical file, and a daughter who had not spoken in 8 days. Amaya clutched the battered elephant figurine, lips pressed so tightly the tips whitened. Flight attendants whispered about the silent child. Mia answered with practiced smiles that never reached her eyes. When the cabin lights dimmed, she watched the girl's chest rise and fall, counting each breath like beads on a rosary. Beyond the window, the continent slid beneath them, deserts, plains, the inky seam of the Mississippi. Yet Mia felt she was moving deeper into stillness, the hush inside her daughter radiating outward until even the engines seemed muffled. Dawn over Queens was the color of old bruises. A drizzle slicked the jet bridge, commuters hunched like refugees fleeing fair-weather memories. No reporters met them. Michael's team had booked tickets under forged names, but Mia walked through Terminal 4 with the posture of someone expecting flashbulbs to burst from the walls. Outside, a livery driver held a placard. Roth Family. She nodded, slid into the town car, and let the rain-smeared skyline swallow her. The apartment on Lenox looked unchanged from the curb. Same chipped stoop paint, same buzzing street lamp. But inside it felt smaller, as though the walls had curled inward during her absence. Dust motes cartwheeled through shafts of light. The refrigerator hummed like a tired insect. Mia set Amaya's suitcase in the bedroom and waited for a sound. Any syllable, any hum of recognition. None came. The child sat on the bed, elephant in lap, eyes fixed on the space between her shoes and the worn parquet. That afternoon, a psychologist on Broadway evaluated Amaya. His office smelled of poster paints and linseed oil. He offered puppets, puzzles, a dollhouse. The girl touched nothing, gaze drifting to the window where a pigeon strutted the ledge. After an hour, the doctor spoke to Mia in the hall. Selective mutism triggered by acute trauma, he said gently. She can speak. She chooses silence to control uncertainty. Therapy, patience, perhaps medication. He handed over a brochure that felt heavier than lead. The fees, printed in tidy columns, eclipsed Mia's severance package before she reached the elevator. Back on the sidewalk, she opened her umbrella to a sky leaking cold rain and wondered how long hope could be rationed. She pictured the napkin, the words that had started everything, tucked for years behind a sugar bowl, now lying in a bank envelope inside her bureau. Paper and ink had attracted ruin. Perhaps they could now fund repair. The idea hardened as she watched a taxi spatter gutter water onto her shoes. Paper for voice, ink for childhood. A trade, not a betrayal. She called the Midtown office of Beaumont and Groff Auctioneers, specialists in celebrity memorabilia. The receptionist's tone brightened when Mia explained her item. Handwritten? Authentic signature? We can schedule a private appraisal tomorrow. She hung up, heart pounding with a guilt she refused to name. Night scraped across Harlem like a dull blade. Amaya lay cocooned in blankets, expressionless, while Mia drafted a letter to Michael on the backs of old gig flyers. You were right. Storms change crops. I'm harvesting for my daughter now. She tore the sheet away, rewrote it 3 times before giving up. Words felt inadequate. Maybe silence was the only language both she and her child now shared. At dawn, she dressed carefully. Black slacks, cream blouse, nothing that whispered opportunist. The napkin she sealed in a plastic sleeve, slid into a folio, and tucked under her arm. Amaya stayed with Mrs. Alvarez from the 2nd floor, who crossed herself as Mia explained the doctor's diagnosis. God returns speech in his hour, the old woman murmured. Mia nodded, grateful yet unconvinced. Beaumont and Groff occupied a penthouse above Madison Avenue. In the reception lounge hung oil portraits of opera divas and boxing champions. A glass case displayed Jackie Onassis's sunglasses beside a lock of Sinatra's hair. The appraiser, Mr. Fielding, wore gloves thin as fog. He examined the napkin beneath a jeweler's loupe, measured slant angles of the signature, compared fibers to known stationery from the 1991 Dangerous Tour. Minutes ticked, each longer than the last. Finally, he straightened, removed the loupe, and cleared his throat. I'm afraid this is not an original autograph. Mia felt air leave her lungs. But I watched him write it. Fielding's expression softened, as though he'd just placed a hand on a hot stove. Ink composition is modern. Mass-produced dye not available until '95. Paper stock, too. Forgery, albeit skillful. He returned the sleeve across the mahogany. I'm sorry. Sentimental value, yes, but auction value, negligible. Shock cratered into something uglier. Confusion welded to betrayal. How could Michael's ink be counterfeit? Had someone swapped napkins during the burglary in Malibu? Or, needle of doubt pricked, had the original always been elsewhere? She gathered the folio with unsteady fingers and fled past portraits that now seemed to smirk. The ride back uptown blurred. She replayed every memory of that night in the starlight. The glide of his pen, the curve of the M, the unexpected weight of disappointment. Could her eyes have lied? The subway rocked her like a lullaby sung off-key. She reached her building just after noon and knew, before turning the key, that something was wrong. The lock's resistance felt different. The door exhaled a draft scented with overturned wood and mildew. Inside, chaos bloomed. Drawers gutted, couch cushions gutted. Flour burst across the kitchen like a snowdrift. Her daughter's bedroom was ransacked, but oddly careful. Stuffed animals lined up on the windowsill, each one's stitched mouth silenced. The bureau drawer where she had kept the napkin lay open, empty, except for splinters where the baseboard had been pried. Nothing else appeared missing. TV, jewelry, even the emergency cash envelope remained. Only the napkin had been taken, as though the intruders knew exactly their quarry and valued nothing else in the world. Police officers arrived, took statements, dusted for prints while muttering about kids seeking drug money. Mia didn't bother explaining the real motive. She doubted a report could capture the absurd algebra. Paper plus ink equaled threat. After they left, she swept broken glass into a dustpan that rattled like distant thunder. Amaya watched from the hallway, eyes wide but voice locked behind invisible bars. Mia crouched, hugged her daughter tight, breathing in the vanilla scent of conditioner. "We are safe," she whispered, though the words felt like a rough translation of a language she no longer trusted. That evening, a courier slid an envelope under the door. No return address, only her name printed with a typewriter ribbon nearing its death. Inside lay a single sheet, ink faintly smudged. "I never wished to be the storm in your life, but sometimes a storm breaks the ground so the seed can breathe. Hold fast." M. No signature flourish, just the initial. An echo of the missing napkin, now evaporated into shadow economies. Mia folded the letter once, set it on the kitchen table and stared at it until the streetlights blinked on. The apartment smelled of chalk dust and police graphite. Rain ticked against the glass, gentler than the California surf, yet somehow louder in its insistence. Mia realized she stood at a fault line. On one side, the tangible world of rent and therapy invoices. On the other, an unseen current that could steal or save with equal ease. She didn't know which ground would hold. She only knew she must move, because stillness invited collapse, and because Amaya's silence demanded an answer louder than any headline. She picked up the phone, thumbed the keypad, hesitated on the final digit of Michael's number. Outside, a siren wailed down Lenox, Dopplering into night. Mia exhaled, lowered the receiver. Not yet. The storm might still be traveling, but tonight she would anchor in the rubble, soothe a child's dreamless sleep, and wait for the next flash that would show, however briefly, which ruins could be rebuilt and which had to be abandoned to the dark. The verdict broke through the radio static on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday, 15 months after the first subpoena. Mia was knotting Amaya's scarf for the fourth adjustment of the morning. Winter clung stubbornly to early April, when the announcer's cadence shifted from casual banter to live bulletin gravity. Jury finds no grounds for civil damages. Case is dismissed. No confetti of innocence followed, only a swarm of qualifiers: reputational damage, settlement rumors, images the public would not soon unsee. The DJ segued into an upbeat track, as if erasing a scandal were that easy. Outside, stoops still glittered with last night's sleet. Harlem breathed a mist of exhaust and frying dough. Mia felt neither celebratory nor relieved, just hollow, like a bell that had rung itself numb during the long proceedings. Amaya, 5 now, tightened her tiny mittened hand in her mother's. The child had begun to whisper again, single-word requests for water, for crayons, but sentences remained rare, fragile as soap bubbles. The mail that day offered its own verdicts: overdue notices, a charity flyer, and a padded envelope with no return address. Inside lay a VHS cassette, the plastic shell labeled only with a gold treble clef sticker. Curiosity wrestled with caution. She waited until Amaya napped, then slid the tape into the VCR scavenged from a pawn shop last December. Snow hissed across the screen, resolving into Michael's face lit by candle flame. He sat in an armchair big enough to dwarf him, dressed not in stage regalia, but an emerald cardigan, book open on his lap. "For Mia and the little artist," he said, voice low, conspiratorial, as though telling secrets under blankets. He began to read. Once there was a tree that grew beside a road nobody mapped. For years, travelers stole its fruit, carved their initials, plucked its branches for walking sticks. One autumn, the tree grew tired and let every leaf fall in a single night. Passers-by called it dead. But inside the bark, sap kept rising. It learned to grow inward, where hands could not reach. The next spring, instead of leaves, it sprouted a single hidden blossom beneath the thickest knot. Just enough color to remind itself it was alive. No moral was spelled out. Michael closed the book, looked straight into the lens. Some roots prefer the dark. That doesn't mean they're broken. The tape ended. Mia sat long after the screen reverted to static, letting the message seep past weariness. Not sentimental. More a coded handshake between people who had both learned how survival sometimes looks like retreat. 2 days later, a courier delivered a slim FedEx pouch. For Amaya, an embossed acceptance letter to the Kensington Academy of Creative Arts, London, tuition and housing paid by an anonymous patron. For Mia, a single first-class ticket to Heathrow. Open date, no sender. She laughed, sharp, incredulous, then cried until the tears felt almost medicinal. Opportunity disguised as separation. The daughter welcomed abroad, the mother granted passage, but not certainty. The travel clinic confirmed Amaya's immunizations. The passport office rushed renewals. A week later, rolling suitcases echoed through JFK's Terminal 7. While they queued for immigration pre-check, Mia rehearsed answers. Art school bursary, extended stay. Yes, we have funds. The napkin theft remained a bruise she did not touch. At the booth, the officer's polite expression shifted. He scanned her passport again, typed rapid commands. 2 colleagues appeared. "Step to secondary, ma'am." Fluorescent lights glared off sterile desks. A wall clock ticked far too loudly. An agent slid a document across. An Interpol notice flagging Mia Robinson as traveling on forged credentials linked to money laundering investigations. The photo attached was hers, Yet the birth date was wrong, the signature crudely imitated. Someone had built a phantom Mia, then reported her. Questions ricocheted. Places of employment, foreign contacts, relationship to Michael Jackson. Amaya clung to her mother's coat, silent once more, tears balancing in corners of her eyes like raindrops about to fall. Mia produced school invitation, psychologist letters, even the crumpled envelope from the anonymous patron. Hours crawled before an investigator, half apologetic, admitted the database entry came from a non-existent French bureau. "Someone wanted you flagged," he conceded, releasing them. But the flight had long since left, luggage riding overhead bins without a claim. Back in the apartment, suitcases still zipped. Mia's phone rang with a British number. A crisp BBC producer greeted her. "We're developing a long-form documentary about Mr. Jackson's private circle," he said. "Waitress to confidant. It's a human interest arc. Footage of the airport incident would be invaluable." Mia's breath hitched. They already knew. "Why would I help you pick at wounds?" she asked. "Because stories heal when told," the producer replied, tone oiled with magazine cover sincerity. She hung up, pulse drumming. Kindness had become currency. Every act of generosity attracted scavengers sniffing for resale value. And yet somewhere across the Atlantic, a school desk waited for a quiet girl who painted her dreams in violet and gold. Mia refused to let sabotage dictate borders. She drafted letters to immigration lawyers, attached notarized affidavits, queued at copy shops until neon lights gave her a migraine. At night, she replayed Michael's tape, the candle, the tree, the inward blossom. She understood, finally, that growth was not always spectacle. Sometimes it was paperwork completed at 3 a.m., or pancakes shaped like elephants to coax a single giggle from a muted child. Spring warmed into June. Michael's legal team sent wordless updates, clippings of charitable events, photos of him planting saplings at children's hospitals, public attempts at resurrection. Public opinion, however, remained a churning tide, half eager to forgive, half sharpening stones. 3 weeks after the Heathrow fiasco, a new envelope arrived, royal blue wax seal, unbroken. Inside, replacement tickets, this time 2 seats side by side, plus a notarized letter from the UK Home Office pre-clearing Mia Robinson for entry. Handwritten beneath the official stamp, a single line. "Blossoms are stubborn." No signature. She booked a second try for the following Thursday, told no one but Mrs. Alvarez and the psychologist. Amaya's suitcase now held not just clothes, but a folder of recent sketches, trees with hollow cores glowing faint gold. Before dawn, they taxied once more to the airport, hearts thumping in wary sync. At passport control, the officer stamped their documents without hesitation. No alarms, no summons to secondary. Mia exhaled a breath she felt she'd been holding since the Napkin first landed on a saucer 3 years prior. 35,000 feet above the Atlantic, cabin lights dimmed. Amaya turned to her mother, opened her mouth, and, for the first time in weeks, shaped a full sentence. Quiet, but steady. "The tree will follow us, right?" Mia swallowed past the sudden swell in her throat. "Yes, sweetheart," she said. "Roots can travel farther than people think." Outside the porthole, dawn painted the rim of the world a thin sherbet pink. Mia closed her eyes, imagined a leafless trunk carrying hidden sap across oceanic darkness, and let herself believe that not every act of kindness had to bleed. Some, by sheer persistence, could learn to bloom all over again. In another season, on another continent, beyond the reach of cameras and counterfeit names. A dry wind slashed through the bus station in Querétaro, lifting grit that tasted like ground bone. Mia stepped down from the battered coach with nothing but a canvas rucksack and the name of a town she had pronounced to the driver in cracked Spanish. Bernal. She left the ticket stub on the seat, left the alias on the passenger manifest, left the last remnant of her Manhattan accent somewhere between Houston and the high plateau. Phones, credit cards, even the silver pendant Amaya once fingered while drifting to sleep. All abandoned in a locker at JFK. Only a spiral notebook rode with her now, every page blank. The monastery lay 2 kilometers up a dirt road ribboned with agave. At dusk, its adobe bell tower glowed coral against the monolith Peña de Bernal, as if the mountain itself exhaled light. A nun in sand-colored habit welcomed her wordlessly, pressed a chipped mug of lime water into her hands, and pointed toward the volunteer dormitory. No signatures, no passport scan. Silence was the only credential required. For days, Mia spoke only when duty demanded. Si, hermana, when assigned to weed the chili garden. Gracias, when bowls of bean stew appeared at noon. She scrubbed flagstone corridors until her wrists ached, learned the low whistle that summoned the burro who carried firewood, and rose before the first bell to join lauds, though she did not know the prayers. The hush was not emptiness, but a braid of soft sounds. Broom bristles, sandal leather, distant cicadas, thick enough to muffle the echo of helicopter rotors that still visited her dreams. Her break came each afternoon in a cloister courtyard where a single mesquite cast lacy shade. A simple wooden chair rested there, parrota, hand-planed, seat polished by decades of habit. She chose it on her second day, unaware of its lineage, and discovered a faint indentation on the back rail. 3 letters burned with a hot nail. M.J. The mark startled her like a ghost's handshake. That evening, the monastery's chaplain, Padre Tomas, found her wiping the chair with a cloth. He was thin as a reed flute, eyes glinting with stories he seldom told. "Él se sentó aquí," he said, in accented English, tapping the rail. He sat here. Mia's pulse quickened. The priest lowered himself onto the stone bench opposite. "He said a voice is only clothing," Tomas murmured, as if reciting scripture. "Silence. Silence is the skin of the soul." He closed his eyes a moment, hands steepled, then rose and shuffled away, robe whispering along the path. That night, by candle, Mia slipped into the tiny library. 3 shelves of theology, 2 of botany texts, and a row of battered literary anthologies. A ledger lay open for borrowers. She traced her finger down faded entries until one leapt out. M. Jackson. Practice of Contemplation. Checked out 1990. No return date. Heart banging, she climbed a stool, located the volume, and eased it free. Between pages browned like antique parchment, margin notes curled in tight blue script. Truth doesn't live in headlines. A flourish beneath, M.J., the same looping hand that had once promised unsuspected gifts on a napkin in Manhattan. Daylight found her sitting in the courtyard chair, journal balanced on knees. Words resisted at first, huddled like feral kittens, but she coaxed them with patience, learned from weeding chili rows. She did not write memoir. She wrote to Amaya, sentences shaped for a future reading. How courage can masquerade as silence. How trees bloom inward before daring new leaves. She recounted the monastery's pre-dawn hush, the way lantern light pooled like honey on sandstone, the aroma of tortillas slapping hot comal. She left out the helicopters, the lawsuits, the counterfeit napkin. Those were noise, and noise was what she had come to shed. Evenings, Padre Tomas joined her wordlessly, sometimes humming a hymn that lacked melody, until it slipped under her skin like cool water. After one such dusk, he spoke. When he was here, he said, nodding toward the chair, he feared that people loved the echo more than the voice. He regarded Mia. And you, Hija? What do you fear? She closed the journal. That I disappeared into other people's echoes and forgot the sound of my own breath. The confession surprised her with its precision. Tomas smiled, gap-toothed, as if she had solved a riddle. Weeks bled into months measured by seedling height and wax drippings on the chapel floor. Summer storms drummed slate roofs. The scent of wet dust replaced incense. Mia's notebook thickened with pages, sketches of the wooden chair, fragment lyrics, a map of all the places she had almost broken. She pressed bougainvillea petals between paragraphs so Amaya could feel color when she finally read the tale. One August afternoon, a pickup truck rattled into the courtyard, backfiring like distant fireworks. The driver, a merchant who bartered cheese for honey, waved a newspaper, La Jornada, headline announcing new allegations, new denials, an endless loop. The Cloister sisters barely glanced before returning to their tasks, yet the printed uproar rushed Mia like a cold wave. She realized the world beyond these walls still roared, and inside her chest, a quieter truth had begun to solidify. Running was no longer retreat. It had become hoarding. She was storing silence like grain, but grain spoils if never baked into bread. That night she folded the final page of her letter, sealed it in wax scavenged from the chapel's spent candles, and addressed it simply. Amaya, wherever the music guides you. She left the journal itself on the library desk beside Practice of Contemplation, slip tucked inside. For the next traveler who mistakes noise for truth. On the chair she placed the newspaper, headline facing down, and in its place set a new inscription she had carved with a fruit knife along the front stretcher. Vox Interior. Listen inward. Before dawn, she hugged Padre Tomas, thanked the sisters, and walked the dirt road toward the bus stop, where roosters were only beginning to question the dark. She carried no proof of who she had been, only the letter for a daughter, and the steadiness that comes when one finally decides to bring their own voice back into daylight. The mountain loomed behind her, ancient, silent, unpublishable, yet known to every traveler who ever looked up. Mia did not turn for a last glance. Some monuments, like some friendships, were better honored by facing forward. The airplane's wheels sighed onto wet tarmac at LaGuardia, and Mia felt the city's density press against the cabin before the doors even opened. The whole burrow humming like an overwound violin after months of desert silence. She traveled light. One duffel, one envelope addressed to her daughter in London, and a notebook she refused to reread until winter. The taxi that carried her south rattled over expansion joints, and every shutter seemed to measure the distance between the courtyard mesquite she had left behind and the neon geometry rising ahead. Harlem appeared almost unchanged. Vendors still braised corn under striped umbrellas. Kids still dribbled half-flat basketballs. But the tempo struck her as louder, almost garish, as though the streets had been remixed while she was gone. She found a 6-month sublet above an upholstery shop on 137th. No phone, just a buzzer and a pay-as-you-go cell she kept powered off. Each dawn she boiled coffee on a single electric coil and listened to pigeons quarrel on the sill. Silence lingered inside her like amber. She guarded it the way monks guard relics. Only after 3 weeks did she switch on the battered radio abandoned by the previous tenant, volume barely higher than breath, curious to learn what songs now threaded the city's pulse. Static coughed, stations blurred, and then a crisp snare snapped through. A new Michael Jackson single, advance cut from the forthcoming history record. Brass, choir, then lyrics that made her spine harden. Leaves may fall, but roots remember. Sap will climb through frozen timber. The words were hers, or near enough to feel stolen. Phrases she had murmured in a candlelit guest house while he sat listening, head tilted like a curious starling. She gripped the countertop, torn between elation and violation. He had not exposed her name, her child, or the Napkin saga, only borrowed the image of that stubborn tree. Yet hearing it broadcast at 50,000 watts was like finding her diary photocopied on street poles. That night, she walked the river path under the arching roar of the Henry Hudson Parkway, wind-snatching wrappers into skyward spirals. Anger ebbed, replaced by a bewildering gratitude. The metaphor had survived, transmuted into melody. Maybe stories were safer wearing music, the same way a fragile seed rides inside a tougher husk. 2 mornings later, a call pierced her self-imposed radio silence. The number displayed a Manhattan exchange she did not recognize. Instinct said ignore, but curiosity won. Ms. Robinson, Daniel Harper, The Atlantic. The voice was measured, apologetic, devoid of tabloid relish. I covered the 94 hearings. I've followed the counter-narrative since. Would you consider writing, not a tell-all, an essay on everyday grace? No names, no settlements, just what kindness looks like when nobody's filming. Mia stared at a crack in the ceiling plaster, paint curling like shedding bark. People mine kindness for clicks now, she said. Precisely why it needs witnesses, Harper replied. Truth has fewer advocates than scandal. He offered a modest advance, complete editorial control. Think about it. Call whenever or never. He left a direct number and hung up. She drafted an outline that afternoon in the library on 135th, but each paragraph felt like a museum placard. Worthy, polished, dead. Words marched. They did not breathe. By closing time, she had more doubts than pages. The librarian flicked lights twice in warning. Mia shoved the draft into her tote and trudged home through puddles reflecting blurred marquees. A courier stood outside her door, rain pinstriping his bike helmet. Package for Monsieur Robinson. He refused a signature, pedaled off before she unlatched the flap. Inside lay a folder of ivory cardstock embossed with a single treble clef. Within, 4 measures of melody inked in cobalt on staff paper, spaces for lyrics left blank. Beneath the staves, in handwriting she recognized from a monastery margin, "This is your story. I wrote only the weather. Fill in the sky. M." No flourish, no surname. The ink still smelled faintly of studio ozone and coffee. She carried the sheet to a rented rehearsal room on 125th, keys borrowed from a gospel pianist who owed her an old favor. Dust veiled the upright's lid. She wiped it with her sleeve, sat, and let fingers find harmonies around his skeleton tune. At first the notes quivered. She had not played in years, but memory unfurled muscle by muscle. She tried words from the essay draft. They clattered like spoons in a dryer. She closed her eyes, reached deeper, recalled the cloister's wind scratching cedar shutters, recalled the chair with the burn mark initials, recalled Padre Tomas saying silence was flesh, not absence. Out poured a verse. I have worn the quiet like linen, stitched by hands that never signed their names. Her own cadence no longer an echo. She sang soft, room accepting each syllable like warm sand. When the last chord faded, she did not cry. She exhaled the way mountains do at dusk, a slow cooling that promises tomorrow. She called Harper next morning from the payphone outside the upholstery shop. "The essay's yours if you still want it," she said, "but it will end where the music begins." "You've chosen a different vessel," he guessed. "Yes, a song. No gossip. Just proof that generosity can travel farther than grief." Silence crackled over the line, then the journalist's gentle assent. "Truth wears many jackets. I'll keep the porch light on for yours." Weeks slid by in quiet industry. By day, Mia stitched cushions for the shop downstairs, inhaling foam dust. By night, she shaped lyrics, trading rough demos with a producer friend who owed her nothing yet asked for no fee. Each dawn, she mailed a page of her progress to Amaya at Kensington Academy, never mentioning Michael, only marveling at how melody could coax courage back into vocabulary. One humid July evening, while cicadas drilled outside the rehearsal window, she laid the final track, a bridge that whispered, rather than belted, homage to the monastery silence. She titled it Root Light. Credits would list her as co-writer. Michael's name would appear second, alphabetically inevitable. She stepped onto Lenox Avenue just as streetlights flickered alive, and for the first time since leaving Mexico, the city's noise no longer threatened to drown her. It felt, instead, like an orchestra tuning, chaotic, anticipatory, waiting for someone to raise the baton. Mia hurried home, humming the tree-born melody, ready at last to let her own leaves rustle in the open air. Rain kept a thin percussion on the window panes the night the call came. March 1999, nearly 4 years after Mia's demo of Root Light found its quiet foothold on late-night public radio. The voice on the line belonged to Charles Hathaway, unchanged but for an undertow of fatigue. He bypassed greetings. "He has no intention of meeting," Hathaway said, "but he'd like you to meet others." Others? Children. Sierra Leone, outskirts of Beau, post-war program. "Your name was given as potential curator of arts residency. No cameras, no press kits. Funding is private." Private, Mia knew, meant Michael. Her pulse steadied. Surprise had learned long ago to survive without theatrics. Yet the proposition stung with intrigue. She asked for 48 hours. Hathaway granted 24. She spent most of that day in the Harlem Community Studio, where Root Light had seated a modest after-school choir. The kids sang off-key with unfiltered joy. Watching them, Mia understood how cunning trauma could be. Dismantle one life, then lurk until called to repair another. By evening, she phoned Hathaway. "Tell him yes." June found her stepping from a UN plane onto a runway, wavering in equatorial heat. Sierra Leone's rainy season had not yet broken. Harmattan dust still filmed the horizon. At the transit barracks, a logistics officer handed her laminated ID. Mia Robinson, arts facilitator, Children's Renewal Trust. No trace of Michael's name appeared anywhere. Supplies were stenciled with a simple cedar emblem. Nothing marketable, everything functional. Beau itself smelled of diesel, plantains, and wet cement. Civil buildings bore shrapnel freckles, but bright fabric stalls had recolonized the sidewalks. The Trust campus occupied a former cocoa warehouse beside a sluggish river. Inside, the air was cooler, laced with chalk and wood shavings from a half-finished puppet theater. Children, in oversized T-shirts, in borrowed sandals, some barefoot, moved through corridors hung with paper lanterns they had fashioned from ration boxes. No one rushed. Urgency had been spent in earlier years of running. They worked instead with steady absorption, as though art were the only dependable clock. Mia's first assignment was the mural wall, a 60-foot concrete expanse pockmarked by bullet scars. She proposed layered underpainting, each child's palm print as root system, stories branching from color. They listened, then began grinding earth pigments with stones, mixing them into water saved from laundry buckets. Laughter emerged, sparingly at first, then in bright bursts. 3 weeks in, while arranging a ladder, Mia noticed fresh paint along the lower course of bricks. A stylized tree whose trunk spiraled from finger-wide roots. At the base, an inscription, charcoal neat against ochre. To the girl who asked for $5. You gave more than you took. MJ. The children swore none of them had written it. The night watch claimed he'd seen a stranger near dawn, face obscured by a scarf, whistling something that might have been a lullaby. The signature felt like a hand laid gently on her shoulder from half the world away. She closed her eyes a moment, long enough to breathe through the swell of gratitude, short enough not to invite questions. August brought monsoon rains at last, pounding zinc roofs until conversations paused. One afternoon, as thunder loosened window putty, the camp coordinator hurried in, umbrella leaking. "Visitor for you." Mia followed him to the covered veranda. A young woman, tall, mahogany-skinned, braids tipped with copper beads, stood beside a canvas travel case. Her smile held a question and a certainty at the same time. "Mom." Amaya was 16, voice as measured as a tuning fork. Kensington's dormitories had closed for term break. Scholarship covered flights. A handwritten note had arrived with her final report card. A keyboard awaits you where the river bends. Play it loudly. Mia managed no words, only pulled her daughter close, the child now musician taller by 2 inches. Rain drummed applause around them. When they parted, Amaya unclipped the case. A 61-key digital board, lightweight but velocity-sensitive, still sheathed in bubble wrap. "He mailed it to London 2 months ago," she said. Address label just said, "Forward where needed." I decided that was here. That evening, generator hum competing with tree frogs, Amaya set the keyboard on a plywood table in the assembly hall. 30 children gathered, wary at first. She played a simple pentatonic riff, coaxed them to echo. Voices, some hoarse, some bell-clear, layered over synthetic strings. Mia watched shapes materialize in sound. Safety, participation, a thin filament of future none of them had dared rehearse. In the back row, a boy missing 3 fingers kept rhythm on an overturned paint bucket, grinning whenever the higher keys chimed. Mia felt her earlier mural plan expand. The wall was only primer. The real canvas was here, vibrating in shared air. She moved to the doorway for more space in her chest and caught sight of the inscription again. The tree now sprouted silhouettes of instruments, drums, a flute, a single microphone, painted by children who had never owned any but understood their promise. Later, walking the compound perimeter under a moon smudged by humidity, Amaya confessed, "I used to hate the quiet after you left. Then I realized silence isn't empty. It's just waiting for a note." Mia squeezed her daughter's hand, thinking of the monastery chair, of roots traveling beneath oceans. September's end approached. Funding cycles shifted. New volunteers arrived with crates of notebooks and iodine tablets. On Mia's final night, the children performed beneath the mural. They wore paper masks they had cut to resemble leaves. When they sang, they removed them one by one, revealing faces steadied by practice. The last song was Root Light, translated into Creole by a local teacher, its refrain now a braided call and response echoing into the river gorge. Mia recorded none of it. She understood, at last, that proof could cheapen miracles. Some gifts traveled best as memory, weightless, smuggled past cynicism like contraband hope. When the jeep took her and Amaya to the airstrip at dawn, the tree on the wall glowed in first light, colors richer for last night's varnish. It would remain after planes and headlines moved on, rooted in palms and pigment, singing quietly to anyone who paused long enough to hear. The January light in London was the color of unpolished pewter, and it bent through the frosted cafe window just enough to silver the steam rising off Mia's teacup. Newspapers lay abandoned on every vacant table. The Independent, the Telegraph, the Daily Mail, all wearing the same headline arranged in differently righteous fonts: Jackson faces criminal trial. Underneath, the wire photo showed him entering a California courtroom in white, umbrella tilted against winter glare, jaw set in something that looked almost like patience. The caption ran 8 indifferent lines, but the photograph itself was deafening. It reverberated against every memory Mia had tried to keep safely archived. A stake of candle conversation in Encino, a blank napkin pressed into her palm 2 nights before airplanes ripped the sky in half, a monsoon mural that still glowed somewhere beside the Bow River. When her phone vibrated, she nearly spilled the cup. Caller ID. Asterisk unknown. Dash international asterisk. That prefix always smelled of corridors with armed guards. She thumbed it live. Ms. Robinson? The voice belonged to Charles Hathaway, each vowel still creased by etiquette, but this morning the starch had wilted. Yes, I'm phoning at Mr. Jackson's request. A soft inhale rasped at the far end, as though he had run the length of some sterile hallway. He knows you might be considering a statement. Mia swallowed. She had not voiced the idea to anyone, not even to Amaya, now studying ethnomusicology at King's. But last night she had scribbled a single line on hotel stationery. I can stand in the dock and testify to his quiet. How does he know? She asked. Hathaway gave a rueful chuckle. You once told him your silences were thunder if someone bothered to listen. He's listening. What did he say? A pause, long enough for Mia to hear paper shuffle, perhaps a note transcribed verbatim. He says, quote, "Tell her she is light. Light should not choose to burn simply because I am walking through fire." A gust rattled the window. The thin flame of a candle on the counter fluttered sideways. Mia thanked Hathaway, ended the call, and let the phone slide face down on the saucer, staining the glossy case with a ring of weak Earl Grey. That evening she walked the South Bank until footpaths empty of tourists echoed her own heels back at her. The Thames rolled thick and patient, unperturbed by flashbulbs a continent away. On a bench beneath a street lamp, she unpacked her notebook, tore out the page she had drafted for testimony, and let it ride the water like a raft, sentences dissolving before the current carried them from view. Back in her flat, she opened a fresh document on the battered ThinkPad Amaya had left behind and stared at the blinking cursor. The memory of Padre Tomas returned. Truth doesn't live in headlines. She began to type. I cannot tell you what happened in rooms I never entered. I can tell you, without ornament, what he did for one woman whose name never filled a marquee. She wrote through the night, not chasing eloquence, merely anchoring details that could not be sued into fiction. A refrigerator abruptly full of groceries, hospital insurance delivered without ceremony, a child learning scales on a keyboard nobody photographed. She excised every sentence that felt like vindication. This would not be an alibi. It would be a ledger of kindness. At dawn, she reread the 800 words, spare, calm, edged with unnegotiable honesty, and hit send to an editor at The Guardian, whose investigative pieces on child soldier rehabilitation she trusted. By noon, the reply arrived. We'll print tomorrow, page 2. No edits, save spelling. Thank you. The thank you felt strange, like gratitude for merely breathing. The piece ran under the headline, A Quiet Testimony. Before Mia finished breakfast, her inbox mutated into avalanche. Booking requests from News Night, long-form podcasts, true crime channels hungry for contrast. An American morning show producer promised first-class airfare, respectful treatment, and the chance to frame your narrative. Mia powered down the phone, pulled the SIM, dropped it in a teacup, and let the plastic drown beside a sachet of chamomile. That afternoon, she and Amaya walked Hyde Park, mist fine as bridal veil softening the serpentine lake. Joggers passed, headphones sealing them from scandal. Swans carved V-shaped sighs across leaden water. "Do you regret it?" Amaya asked. Mia answered with the shake of a head. Regret required doubt, and she felt only completion. The steady click of a lock turning home. The letters arrived in ladled heaps. Some slid under her door by anonymous admirers, some forwarded by Guardian staff, some addressed to the girl who asked for $5. She read what she could. Teachers thanking her for nuance, conspiracy theorists damning her as stooge, a hospice nurse who wrote, "You reminded me why I hold hands with strangers at 3 a.m. Mia answered none. Words had done their work. More words would only wobble the structure. 2 weeks later, a padded envelope bearing no postmark lay on the hallway mat. Inside, a single sheet of creamy stationery scented faintly of eucalyptus, and beneath it, an unlabeled mini-disc. "I heard your voice," the letter began, ink sweeping as though steadied by deep breath. "It carries, even while silent. You are free. Stay that way. Always." No salutation, no signature, but he was there in the slanted bar of the Y, the flourish that refused to look like flourish. Mia slotted the disc into an aging portable player retrieved from a drawer. Soft hiss, then a recording. Michael alone at the piano, humming not melody but intervals, fifths, sevenths, like someone tuning doubt out of the room. No lyrics. At the end he spoke, tone barely above the keys. "Some stories use oxygen faster than lungs can breathe. When that happens, sing underwater. The notes will reach air eventually." A click, tape run out. She pressed stop, placed headphones on the table, and sat a long while. Across the street, scaffolding crews hammered a facade, dust drifting like weary confetti. Trains rattled over Hungerford Bridge. Someone whistled Green Sleeves out of tune. Layered together, they sounded curiously like an unfinished chord searching for resolution. She realized the ache in her throat was not sorrow, but an almost maternal pride. The boy who had danced atop global tremors had learned to trust silence enough to mail it as a gift. Spring melted into a muggy June. Cable coverage from Santa Maria showed jurors filing back into chambers, verdict imminent. Mia kept the television off. Whatever the outcome, public opinion already bulged with conclusions too noisy to notice facts. She went instead to Camden Lock, bought 5 tulips from a vendor who sang Sinatra while making change, and left them on the doorstep of the Royal Musicians Benevolent Fund with a note, for scholarships in waiting. That night she dreamt of the monastery chair transported onto the witness stand. Simple, Perota wood, unvarnished, occupying the center as lawyers fired cross-examinations at empty air. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashed, and the chair did what chairs do, held space, refused commentary, never once misunderstood its purpose. She woke to rain against the sash and felt lighter than she had in years. The Guardian piece remained online, copied, quoted, condemned, cherished. It belonged to strangers now, the way a planted tree belongs first to soil, then to birds, then to whoever needs shade. Her part was finished. Even so, when the BBC chimed the radio bulletin announcing "Not guilty on all counts," she listened through once, twice, let the words settle like slow dust on piano strings. She made no celebratory calls, accepted no invitations to pontificate. She brewed coffee, opened a fresh page in her journal, and wrote only 2 sentences. 3 chords can outlast an earthquake. Silence is the seam that keeps them together. She closed the book, placed the mini-disc inside its pocket, and moved to the window where double-decker buses dragged glistening red across the slick asphalt. Somewhere over an ocean of time zones, a man who had learned to sing underwater was resurfacing into more trouble, more limelight, more impossible expectations. She could not tow him to shore, but she could hold a lantern from far inland, steady and quiet, until he either glimpsed the glow or fashioned one of his own. Los Angeles kept its December warmth like a secret, the air perfumed by jacaranda even after dark. When Mia stepped out of the taxi in Brentwood on Christmas Eve, she found no iron gates, no mirrored facade, only a single-story Spanish bungalow hiding behind hedges of rosemary and night-blooming jasmine. A paper star lantern glowed on the porch, its recycled parchment stenciled with music notes that fluttered when the wind turned. The address on the envelope she had received 2 weeks earlier matched the hand-painted numbers by the mailbox. No surname, no crest, just 1258. Charles Hathaway opened the door before she could knock, his tailored suit replaced by an oatmeal wool cardigan that made him look almost unrecognizable, like a teacher on winter break. "He's awake," he murmured. "But take your time." He handed her a glass of water and vanished down a hallway, soft socks sliding soundlessly on wood. Mia paused in the entryway, letting her eyes adapt to the low lamplight. The living room could have belonged to a literature professor. Built-in shelves bowed under paperbacks with sun-faded spines. A worn Persian rug muted the floorboards. An upright piano leaned against the far wall, its mahogany dulled by fingerprints. Only 2 hints betrayed the owner's history. A VHS tape labeled "Bad Tour, Yokohama," used as a makeshift doorstop, and a solitary silver glove resting inside a shoebox atop the piano. Its sequins dulled like old snow. A voice drifted from the adjoining room, breathy, conversational. "You never really finish a song. You only choose the moment it escapes." She followed the sound to a sunroom enclosed by French windows. Michael sat in an armless wooden chair, feet in wool socks, plaid blanket draped across his knees. The once electric curls were now threaded with gray strands, pulled back loosely. His hands trembled where they rested on a leather-bound journal. A pitcher of water and 2 small pill bottles occupied the side table. He looked up, and the smile that crossed his face was quiet, relieved, like shore finally seeing a lighthouse. "I was afraid the letter wouldn't find you." His voice carried the slightest rasp, yet every syllable landed intact. Mia removed her coat, folded it over a corner of the couch. "You addressed it better than the first napkin," she answered, soft grin in return. He chuckled, shoulders relaxing. "I had help. Handwriting's not reliable anymore." He lifted his right hand. The tremor ticked gently, a metronome no conductor could hush. "Bad nerves, too many years of adrenaline. The bill came due." She eased onto the couch opposite. Between them, a low table held 2 steaming cups of ginger tea, already prepared. Steam formed fragile curlicues that vanished before touching the ceiling fan's lazy revolutions. Outside, A neighbor's Christmas lights blinked red, green, gold, reflecting off the window panes like distant traffic. Inside, time slowed to the measured pulse of breaths. "Why did you call me now?" she asked, fingers warming against porcelain. He considered the question, gaze drifting to the journal on his lap. "Because the world's volume is thinning. I wanted to be sure you could still hear the quiet underneath." He traced the edge of the cover. "I remember everything you said about silence. I wrote it here. May I?" He extended the journal. Mia hesitated, thumb grazing the pebbled leather, then opened to the first page. Date: January 5th, 1991. Entry: She asked for $5, but her eyes were braver than her voice. Below that, line after line of meticulous observation. Her laugh at an off-mic joke the band cracked. The way she always tested bathwater with her knuckles. Her habit of whispering tempo counts when stacking plates. Whole paragraphs recorded their stolen conversations. Her fury at paparazzi. Her fear when Amaya first went mute. Her confession in Mexico that she had lost her own melody. Every anecdote ended with a timestamp and a brief reflection, never indulgent, always framing Mia as the subject of study rather than himself. She flipped further. On a page dated 11 September 2001, he had taped a newspaper clipping of the evacuation photo. Unknown woman with child. Beneath, only 3 words. She stayed light. Tears pricked the corners of her vision, not loud enough to fall. She closed the journal gently. "You wrote me better than I ever could." "I wasn't writing for me," he whispered. "When memory fades, paper listens." They sat with that truth. Wind rattled the palm fronds outside like rain sticks. From the kitchen floated faint cinnamon. Someone, perhaps Hathaway, warming holiday arroz con leche. Mia set the journal aside. "I used to think you gave me a question," she said. "But it was a direction. What are your questions now?" He looked toward the piano, eyes reflecting the tiny star lantern's glow. "I wonder how many children remember that I listened more than I sang, and whether listening counts when the songs are gone." "You heard them," Mia said. "That counts. Echoes outlive the bell." He nodded, throat working around unspoken gratitude. Then, with effort, he pushed to his feet and shuffled to the piano. The blanket slipped. Mia moved to steady it, but he raised one calming hand. Sitting on the bench, he lifted the fallboard. Keys had yellowed, a few stuck. He pressed C major softly. The chord wavered but held. And then he played, not polished, not choreographed, just a handful of slow arpeggios that melted into the motif from Root Light. His left hand faltered. Mia stepped behind him, laying her right over the shivering tendons, filling in the harmony on the climb. Together they formed a fragile lattice of sound. No audience, no camera, only 2 beating hearts and wood reverberating with unfinished grace. When the song ebbed, he let his fingers rest. "That's all I can manage these days," he confessed. "It's enough," she answered, because in that room the chord still hovered, larger than illness. He returned to the chair, breathing noisily but smiling. From the side table he lifted a plain envelope. "This is the last invitation I'll ever write," he said. "No showtimes, no passes. It's simply my permission for you to remember me wrong if it helps you write right." She accepted the envelope. Inside she felt a single note card, but did not pull it free. Night deepened, the lantern's glow tightening around them. They spoke of smaller things. Amaya's scholarship research on West African modes, Michael's favorite children's book he reread during bouts of insomnia, the way fame altered taste so that applause could feel like bitterness on the tongue. At one point he chuckled about how tabloids guessed he slept in a hyperbaric coffin. If only they knew I nap in that thrift store recliner over there. $5 at Goodwill. Cheapest headline I never wrote. Minutes slipped, unmeasured. Finally Hathaway reappeared, clearing his throat. Time for medication. Michael squeezed Mia's hand. "I may not perform again," he said, eyes gentle. But performance was never the point. Maybe someone will remember the quiet between the beats. She rose, leaned forward, pressed a kiss to his temple where silver threaded through charcoal. "I'll remember the rest notes," she promised. He smiled, childlike, steadfast. "Then I'm already heard." Outside, the city's midnight traffic whispered up San Vicente like distant surf. Mia opened the envelope under a street lamp before calling a cab. Inside was a single Polaroid, her, captured in profile in that sunroom, face lit by the lantern's star-shaped rays, one hand resting on the back of his chair. Across the white margin, he had scrawled 5 words in shaky ink. "You finish the chorus first. Nothing more. No signature. No date." The street lamp flickered. Somewhere, a neighbor's wind chime tinkled a Christmas hymn. Mia tucked the photo into her wallet behind an old Metro card and took a long, lung-filling breath of jasmine-laced air. The night smelled both like endings and like the shy beginning of something undecided. She realized that was exactly what he had offered. A drawing-room door left ajar, permission to choose which side of the threshold would be home. She turned toward the avenue, hailed a cab, and, as it pulled away, the faint reflection of the bungalow's lantern receded in the window, small, persistent, undeniable. A single note held in fermata against all the noise waiting just beyond sunrise. The cafe on Amsterdam Avenue wore the lazy hush of high summer. Ceiling fans click-clacked like distant bicycle spokes, and a single radio by the espresso machine whispered a classic soul playlist that never seemed to move past 1977. Mia sat at the counter near the window, rereading edits on a grant proposal for the Harlem After-School Choir, her pen hovering above a typo she had circled twice. Outside, the sidewalk shimmered. Heat rose off the asphalt in soft waves that made parked cars waver like mirages. At 10 minutes past noon, the proprietor, a retired saxophonist named Lewis, aimed the remote at the hanging television, trying to tune in Yankees highlights. Instead, the screen replaced the ballpark with a red banner. Breaking news. The anchor's tone was the peculiar blend of urgency and disbelief, reserved for catastrophes large enough to break routine, but not yet understood. "Michael Jackson dead at 50, the crawl announced, marching across the bottom edge like a funeral parade in miniature. Mia's pen slipped from her fingers, struck the counter, and rolled until it tapped her coffee saucer. She did not move to retrieve it. Sound drained from the room. Even the whir of the fridge motor felt muted, as though taking its hat off in respect. Lewis glanced her way, brow furrowing. He had never asked about her past, but he knew the shape of her silence whenever the king of pop slipped into conversation. Gently, he plucked a paper napkin from the chrome dispenser and slid it across. "Need this more than caffeine, I reckon." She stared at the folded square, white, ordinary, nothing written. "Thank you," she managed, voice threadbare. She did not blot tears. None had come. She simply laid a palm atop the napkin, as though testing the pulse of absence, and breathed until radio static replaced the news feed and Lewis fumbled the volume knob lower. Walking home, Mia expected the city's usual collision of scents: roasted nuts, hot dog water, diesel, but the air felt weirdly scentless, as if an olfactory switch had been thrown. At her brownstone, the lobby mailbox door hung ajar. Inside waited a small envelope, postmarked Los Angeles, June 23rd. She recognized the slanted script immediately and felt the universe jolt into slow motion. Upstairs, she placed the envelope on the kitchen table, washed the subway grit from her hands, and only then slit the seal. A single napkin slid out, hospital crisp, blank from corner to corner. No initials, no sentence. Tucked behind it, a half-sheet note, the handwriting shaky yet unmistakable. Finishing is your art, not mine. Leave room for breath. M. No date, no valediction, just the final handoff. She leaned against the cabinets, sudden dizziness bending her knees. All the napkins of their history, first scrawled promise, counterfeit forgery, monastery silence, collapsed into this one, as if every previous message had been training for a canvas stripped clean. Footsteps padded down the hallway. Amaya appeared, wrist still indented by hours of practicing triads. She took in her mother's expression, the envelope, the news murmuring faintly from the living room set. "I saw," she said, voice soft as a tuning note. Her eyes shimmered, but held no tears, only a deep, nearly adult steadiness. Without speaking further, she crossed to the keyboard set against the wall, sat, and began to play. Not root light, not any piece Mia recognized. Something new, minor key sliding toward hopeful major, rhythms pausing just long enough to invite silence between measures. Halfway through, she looked over her shoulder. "Does it hurt less?" she asked. "If we make the quiet sing?" Mia approached, napkin trembling between her fingertips. She laid it on the music stand. "I think," she replied, choosing words carefully, "the quiet was always the melody. We just needed lyrics." Amaya nodded, resumed playing, the motif now brightening as though sunrise seeped through a cracked curtain. Mia fetched a pencil. Lines spilled before the graphite cooled, verses about $5 courage, about groceries that appeared like grace, about a chair in Mexico and a mural in Bow, and a star lantern in Brentwood. She wrote of rest notes and rescued children and a boy from Gary who once believed applause could stitch every wound. The blank napkin waited, receptive. When the final chord faded, mother and daughter read the verses aloud, hesitant but gaining cadence. Mia flipped the pencil, erased 3 adjectives that felt showy, then turned the napkin over and inscribed, in clean, deliberate print, "The greatest gifts come unnoticed. MJ. Until someone dares to notice. Mr." She pinned the cloth to the corkboard above the keyboard, beside rehearsal schedules and grocery lists. It fluttered slightly in the breeze from the oscillating fan, like a small white flag of both surrender and beginning. Only then did tears arrive, slow, uncontested, but they fell onto music paper rather than the typed obituary scrolling across the muted television. As she wiped her cheeks, Amaya reached for her hand. "Mom," she said, "he taught me to be silent. But he also taught me why to break that silence." Mia squeezed her daughter's fingers, steady as an unbroken cord, and felt the ache in her chest rearrange itself into something like readiness. That night, long after midnight traffic dwindled, Mia sat at the kitchen table drafting the framework of a new piece. Part lullaby, part eulogy, all breath. She titled the page, $5. In the margin, she noted instrumentation, solo voice, child choir echo, jazz piano underscoring. At the top, she penciled a dedication. For anyone who mistook quiet for emptiness. When she laid the pencil down, the city hummed a low electrical lull outside, taxis sawing down rain-slick avenues, and somewhere beneath that hum, she imagined the gentlest counter-melody, a rustle of stage costume sequins, a foot pivoting on powder-dusted plywood, a soft intake of air before the first note of a concert that would never start, yet somehow had always been playing just under the roar, waiting for its listener. The napkin gleamed in the half-light, blank spaces drying into permanent invitation. Mia whispered into the room, "I'm finishing it, Michael, on my own breath." The quiet answered, not with echo but with room enough to write. The Hudson glittered like hammered pewter under a chill October dusk, but inside the newly restored Apollo Annex, the air pulsed warm with anticipation and the faint smell of disinfectant that had become 2020's perfume. Rows of chairs stood in checkerboard spacing, 3 feet between each, programs laid like placemats, yet the hall still felt full. Doctors in scrubs the color of storm clouds, teachers whose eyes showed exhaustion above fabric masks, and children clutching glow-stick bracelets all leaned forward in a shared, almost defiant hunger for live sound. The host, a jazz trumpeter whose own lungs bore tiny scars from the spring's pandemic surge, stepped beneath the Art Deco proscenium and waited until the house dimmed to a blue hush. "Tonight," he said, voice amplified just enough to graze the back wall, "we will hear a song that once had no words, but words found it, as they do when someone finally listens." He gave a gentle half-bow toward the wing. "Please welcome Mia Robinson." Applause rose, polite but charged, like static before a summer storm. Mia emerged not in sequins or spotlight white, but in charcoal linen, silver at her temples, glowing against the stage lights. She carried nothing but a folded sheet of paper, and the steady composure of someone who has spent years rehearsing silence. She stopped at the single microphone, adjusted it a hair lower, and let the applause taper naturally. When the last claps faded, she did not begin with hello. She began with story. "Some years ago," she said, "I asked a stranger for $5 so I could buy milk for my child. He left no coins. He left only silence, on the back of a napkin." She held up the paper in her hand, not the napkin itself, but a copy of the quote now familiar to thousands. "The greatest gifts come unnoticed." I didn't believe it that night. Hungry children notice everything. But silence, it turns out, is a stubborn seed. Give it time, and it cracks granite. A screen behind her flickered to life. A Kenyan classroom painted sky blue where barefoot students rehearsed rhythms on upcycled plastic buckets. A Jakarta children's ward where 4 Poles wore ribbons, nurses dancing amid beeps. A South Bronx community garden where teenagers wrote haiku on scraps of cloth pegged between tomato stakes. In every clip, the same prop appeared somewhere. White napkins, sometimes embroidered, sometimes wax paper thin, covered in handwriting. "These are stories that germinated in quiet," Mia continued. "They traveled further than any booth in any cafe. A boy in Lagos who lost both parents writes on his napkin, 'I will teach math so nobody counts bodies.' A nurse in Queens writes, 'My fear could have devoured me. I fed someone else instead.' They do this not because a pop star waved, not because a headline asked, but because silence offered them empty space, and they dared to notice. Music began to glow at stage right. 6 young strings, a brushed drum kit, and at the piano, a Maya, now 30, posture relaxed, mask tucked under her chin for the sake of the microphone mounted to the keyboard edge. She nodded once to her mother. Mia turned slightly, voice dropping into the warmth of shared confession. "I will not sing tonight," she told the audience. "My daughter and these young musicians will do what I once ran from. They will give melody to stillness. All I ask is that you let the first minute of this piece be yours." No applause, no phones. Meet the quiet the way we met it years ago. She stepped back, folded her script, and crossed to a podium placed beneath a narrow spotlight. There, encased between museum glass, hung the original napkin, now bearing two inscriptions. The greatest gifts come unnoticed. MJ until someone dares to notice. Mr. Her presence beside the artifact drew no oxygen from the hall. She was caretaker, not exhibit. A single bell tone shimmered from the vibraphone. The strings answered with a drone tuned to a heartbeat. For 60 measured seconds, no one breathed loudly. Then Amaya's chordal progression opened, minor sliding into hopeful Lydian, and the child choir, masked, distanced, began a soft hum that swelled into the first lyric Mia had penned the night her mentor died. I wore the quiet like linen, threaded by hands I never met. Every 20 bars, the children paused and lifted napkins of their own, each inscribed with a personal aim: protect, invent, heal, forgive, holding them toward the audience before tucking them into pockets, meant for tomorrow. Cameras rolled for the live stream, but no close-up intruded. The director had been instructed to film wide, leave anonymity intact. Mid-piece, a projection splashed across the cyclorama. The $5 bill Mia once lacked, enlarged, ghosted. Pixels peeled away until only Abraham Lincoln's ear remained, turning into a listening icon. Underneath, a line scrolled in foot-high letters. Value equals the ears you lend. As the final chorus approached, the choir shifted into call and response. $5 for a gallon of sky, $5 for the time to ask why, $5, and a pocket of grace, $5, leaves the world a trace. On the last repetition, voices dropped out, leaving Amaya alone to resolve the cadence into a whispering arpeggio that refused to finish. She lifted her hands, sustained pedals held the chord suspended, vibrating air like a question mark. In that hush, Mia returned to the central mic. I was a waitress, the world forgot the second it looked away, she said, each syllable settling like dust motes. But somebody saw past my uniform. Somebody listened. Tonight, I place that seeing, that listening, in your hands. She produced a crisp $5 bill from her pocket, folded it once, and set it gently in the clear donation box at the foot of the stage. Hundreds of similar bills and envelopes soon followed, rustling like soft rain. House lights warmed. The host returned, eyes wet behind horn-rim frames. There will be no encore, he announced, gently definitive. The quiet has sung. And he stepped aside so the audience could exit, still carrying its echo. Backstage, stagehands rolled cables. The children compared napkin messages, promising to keep them safe. Amaya embraced her mother, forehead to forehead. Mia felt the girl's pulse, steadier than her own had ever been at that age, and exhaled deep gratitude. They paused a final time before the framed napkin. Under glass, the ink seemed freshly set, the cloth's weave luminous, as if lit from within. Will it ever feel finished? Amaya asked. Mia considered the rows of empty seats, programs abandoned like shells after the tide. Stories don't finish, she said. They hand off. Tonight we pass the baton. Tomorrow someone else will run. She reached out, not quite touching the frame, and smiled at her reflected silhouette. Older, yes, but sharp with unextinguished purpose. On the street, sirens wailed toward some minor midnight crisis. Horns argued at a jammed intersection. Yet beneath the metropolis racket, Mia detected something subtler. Remnants of hum lingering in strangers' throats. A readiness to hold breath for one deliberate beat before speaking. That was the vow the night had etched, an after-sound as potent as the music itself. She and Amaya walked north under autumn plane trees, shedding gold. At a corner garbage bin, a teenager fed an entire notebook page by page into the wind so each sheet could float free before landing. He wasn't filming it for likes. He was watching the papers travel, simply curious where they would settle. Mia understood. Some gifts, once released, belong to whichever curb, fence, or open palm dares to notice them. $5 had bought no milk that long-gone evening. It had purchased instead a lifetime of listening. And tonight, amid masks, floodlights, and the soft rustle of napkins tucked into new pockets, it earned compounded interest in every ear that chose to hear.